This is Mr. Rodenkirk from Washington High School. He's a ceramics teacher. He has a problem for me to solve today, so we're going to ask him to explain what the problem is, and then we're going to solve that problem with a 3D printer today. Go ahead.
All right, so I just bought this e-bike, and I have two boxes that go on the side, and then one box that goes on the top. And when I put the side boxes on, the top box is too low, and you can't open the side boxes. So I need to attach this mounting plate to this mounting plate, but I need it to be 2.5 inches taller. The screw holes that are in this are also a little too wide for my mounting plate, so we need to design something that attaches onto this mounting plate to make it wider and 2.5 inches taller, so that we can attach this mounting plate onto that. Help me, Steve.
All right, here you go.
Okay.
All right, guys, so first off, I'm noticing that there's two holes right here, and they don't line up with anything on the bottom of this thing. So my first thought is that there's probably going to be, we're going to drill a couple more holes here. They could also be a different size if we wanted to, although these, no, they're not threaded. These are not threaded. So we could easily drill these larger if we wanted to. We can put whatever size bolt we want here, but we're going to end up with 4 bolts, and we're going to make them equidistant. So whatever they are there, they're going to be the same all the way around. I'm going to create something that starts out with this shape here, but comes out at an angle this way, so that it will be wide enough for me to put holes that I can bolt something on. Yeah, there's spots right here. So basically he'll be able to put bolts down through here, through this thing entirely, and put nuts on the bottom of it. And there will also be, and this object will be bolted down to here. So a piece of plastic bolted down to here, and then this will be able to sit on here, and bolts will drop down into these 3 holes here, down through this piece of plastic is what I'm going to do. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is typically what I like to do is to have a pencil here, which I think is probably in my pocket. What I'm going to do, and I'll do it off camera, is I'm going to take this, I'm going to basically map out this entire shape here, and I'm going to recreate that in SketchUp, and then from that I'm going to design the rest of the stuff. I'm going to create what I know I have first, which is this platform, in SketchUp first. And then I'm going to sit at my computer and do the rest of it there at the computer. All right, that's the end of it. All right, so I'm still working in woodworking inches, although I don't really need to be. I could be working lots of different things. So I've taken the, I have a little drawing of the thing on his scooter back there. It's basically a rectangle that happens to be almost exactly 5 by 6 inches. Camera standard top. It happens to be about 2 inches, 2 inches. Now I probably could just ignore this curve altogether, but personally I kind of like to work with exactly what I've got. So that's basically what he's got out there in terms of like the whole shape of his metal. Now I also took measurements on those 2 holes. There's a hole here and there's a hole here. Those measurements are coming from this direction 1.35 inches, and I took those measurements using the calipers, and they are 1 1/8, which is 1.125 inches this way, 1.125 that way. Okay, so that's where his holes are. So this distance here is 2.5 inches, or 2 3/4 inches. So I'm going to add a second set of holes, 2.75 inches right there. So basically they're equidistant holes is where I'm going to put those. And we're going to drill them out at, do you want to do 1/4 inch bolts or 3/8 inch bolts? Probably the thing out there is 1/4 inch bolts. You want to stick with that?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, we're going to stick with 1/4 inch bolts. Camera, I'm going to do view, toolbars, large tool set. We're getting started, close that. Do this. Remember, you're typing in the radius of 0.125 is half of So this is what he's going to have on his scooter once we've drilled it out. So this is what we're going to be building upon on his scooter. Oops, which is not a scooter. What's going on? There it is. So this is what we need to build on. I'm going to give this a little thickness, because that thickness doesn't really matter. And I'm going to make this thing a group. Alright, so this is going to be a fairly simple object. So basically, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this. I definitely advise, and especially in SketchUp, I love the fact that we can create different points in time. Meaning we don't have to, I can do this, drag that over, say 12 inches, and I can leave this one alone. So that I can change, if I don't like it, I can go back to that original one. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to explode this real quick. I'm going to copy and paste that. I'm going to regroup this thing. I'm now going to take this thing and set it on top of here. And this is the beginning of what I'm going to create for him. So let's see. Whatever we're making for him, we want it to be you said you wanted how tall?
2.75.
2.75. So not 3.
Yeah.
Okay. So this basically represents the lift sitting right on top of this thing that he wants to do. We need to make sure that in the end, it needs to be wide enough to hit these holes right here. And those holes are, so we need to know precisely. What's most important is the distance between the two screw holes, or the two holes. And this happens to be 5 and it's a little bit more than, it's a weird measurement. Well, first of all, the hole is a 1/4 of an inch hole. And so it's going to be easier, rather than trying to measure from center to center, I'm going to measure from outside to outside, because it happens to be in exactly a 1/4 inch hole. So the outside measure of this thing is, as expected, the answer was something to do with 32nd, which I found odd. 6 3/16. So 6 3/16 is the outside of the two holes. So 6 3/16. So we're probably going to make this thing 7.5 in the end, which means that I'm going to draw a line half of 7.5, which is 3.5, 3 3/4, 3.75, I believe. And then from here to here, 3 point, did I say 7.5? Did I do that right? And if I did that, this thing is 7.5. And that's what, yeah, 7.5 sounds good. So I'm going to grab this line, and this line, and this line, and this line, and this line. And I'm just kind of figuring things out at this point and seeing if I can make this thing work. And I'm going to extend that out to there. And I'm not actually sure that that is, no, that's not the best way of doing that. I'm going to take this whole shape and I'm going to extend it out. Actually, I'm going to drag. I'm going to scale it. That's what I want to do. I'm going to scale it out to. Alright, so here's where some math is going to get involved. This is currently 5 inches wide and I want it to be 7.5, which conveniently is an easy measurement. It's 150%. So I need to increase this thing. I'm going to scale this thing in the centers. I think I need to hold the shift key, nope, control key to shift it to do it evenly. 1.5, and if I do that, I'm going to need to do this first. I need to get rid of these holes. Because when I extended the top, it made those holes go at a slant. And that ain't gonna work. So I'm now gonna take this thing and I'm going to scale it. to hold the control button so it scales evenly to 1.5. And now I'm going to, nope, that was not what I wanted to do. I'm going to pull this thing up 2.75, and then I'm going to scale the top with the control button 1.5, and now I've got this thing that fits perfectly on here, but is the correct width on the top. Okay. Now obviously, is this the only answer I could have come up with? No. It's not like I magically was so powerful in my mind that I was able to figure out the one thing that could be done. There's lots of answers to this. This is just one of those answers. Now I am also going to, well, I'm going to do something else in a moment. So that is going to fit on there, and it is now 7.5 inches wide. It does concern me, how long is this thing? I want to make sure that it doesn't go too far here. This thing is 9 inches, which actually is just about right. So this thing is going to be 7 inches wide. It's going to come down here to about here, and then it's going to curve around the front. It's actually going to fit really nicely on this thing. I'm pretty happy with that. Oh, especially since it's not going to be that full 9, and I'll explain that why later. But for right now, I'm going to move this thing out of the way here. Nope, I'm not going to do that. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to, this thing is currently not grouped, right? It is grouped. Explode that. This one's not exploded. And I'm going to come here to the center of here. And do the same thing on all of these things. And then I'm going to push this thing up 2.75, I believe was our measurement. Yep. Double click, double click, double click. And so now I've got this object here, which fits beautifully on top of this thing and extends it out to the size we want. Now, we don't want this, this extra right here. We want to get rid of that. The way that I'm going to get rid of that is I'm going to create some big block here. And I'm going to make this thing a group for the moment. I'm going to make this thing a group for a moment just so nothing sticks to anything. I'm going to put this right down here. I'm going to drag it sideways so that it is fully encompassing that object right there. It's not touching that, which is nice. I'm going to now explode this. I'm going to explode this. And I'm going to select everything here, and I'm going to do Intersect Faces with Model. And I don't know if you saw that or not. I want you to notice that there's no line right there. When I click these things and I intersect faces with Model, that line's going to show up. Because basically what it did is it took all the lines from all the different objects and added them to each other. So now I'm going to be able to delete this thing. This is not something we taught in class. I taught in class, but it's something you learn if you take enough interest in the program to learn new things. And now I can do this and that. And c'est voila. Fantastique. It's beautiful. It's marvelous. That looks lovely. That should work beautifully. Now the next thing we need to do is I need to create a space for this for the nut of this screw here. Meaning that when I put a bolt in here, there's going to need to be some space for the head of the bolt, is what I'm looking for. So this thing was 1/4 of an inch, so we're going to do 0.25 as a radius, and we're going to push down, make that happen. 0.25 should be fine. Basically, I made an inset so that when we drop the bolt down through that thing, the head will sit underneath that. And we're going to do the same. Oh, this is going to be be a bit tough. I am predicting a problem, but it's not going to be a problem. We're going to make it work. That's what we're going to do. It's probably a little bigger than we needed to do. We're going to do it anyways. Hopefully I can double click it and it'll do the same thing on each of these, which it did nicely. Nicely. And I should be able to double click on this, that, and do the same thing. There we go. So that's going to allow for a nice big long bolt to go through here and be bolted down into underneath this thing, and that's going to secure that. I think we're good with that. Now the next order of business are these. Actually, what I'm going to do now, probably should have done this earlier, is to make a copy, drag it over 12 inches. Oops. Hold Z. Oh. Let's just do that. Alright. So if I screw this one up, I've got that one to go back to. Alright, so now, let's find our middle here. That's the middle of this thing. So that we can center it on this. So, once again, that outside dimension was 7 5/16. From here to here, oh actually it's not. It's 5 11/16. Trying to be very precise. And it's really very tight. It still looks like 6. It's 5 and that's like 10/16. 10 1/2/16 is 21/30 seconds. I'm gonna go with 5 and 21/30 seconds.
Could we use this?
Oh, we could. Now that's an awesome thing. Thank you very much, Jake, for pointing that out. We could use these things right here, which allows for a lot more of flexibility, right? If I don't get this thing nailed on exactly the right spot, it won't matter if I'm using these things over here. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and go with that. That is a very good idea. So we're looking at, so I'm gonna put these things 6 inches, because that was 7 1/2, 3/4 of an inch. We're gonna go with 5 1/2 inches apart across from each other. So 5 1/2 inches across. If we do 5 1/2 inches across, then we're looking for 2.75 inches this direction, 2.75 inches this direction, which puts these lines 5 1/2 inches away from each other. Okay? It is important that this distance be correct, and this, conveniently enough, is nice and easy. It's 3 3/8, and these holes are more like 5/16 across, which is nice. So 3 3/8 is the distance. So we have, all right, so the distance from the back, which is this spot right here, needs to be 1 1/2, a little over 1 1/2 inches. Although it's not going to matter if it's slightly off, because that's just going to mean that this thing is slightly forward or backwards. 1.5 inches. So that was, I'm going to double check because we all know to measure twice, cut once. 1 1/2 inches. And then we're going to move up this way 0.25 inches. And this is where, right there in the middle of that line, is where I need to put this hole. So I'm going to, that was 1 1/2, 1 3/4, so that's a 1 5/8. Okay, so that's where I'm going to put my first, these two holes here. So right in the middle of that spot right there. 0.125 is 1/8 of an inch. So that's where I'm going to put that hole. And then the distance between these two from center to center is 3 1/4 3 and 11/16. So from here, 3 and 11/16. And let's see what happens here. So we're going to need to do the same thing we did last time when it was that when we were when I used the intersecting faces with model. I'm going to need to do this here because of the fact I'll show you why I'm doing that. By the way, let me explode this. If I push through this, which is what I want to do, I want to push this all the way through here and cut that. It does not cut cleanly, and there's no way for me to cut that cleanly because of that. So there's no way for me to cut that. So the way to do this is to do that intersecting faces with model thing again. And if they make this thing a group, I'm going to put a circle on each one of these things, and I'm going to pull it up 5 inches more than I need to. I'm going to do the same thing on each of these things. So I'm going to go to X-ray now, because I think this will be easier to do it this way. If I select this object, I'm going to make it a group, and I'm going to move it from center. I made it move a copy over here. Move a copy over here. Copy over here. Now here's where it's going to get really fancy, because I need to now I'm going to delete these. Explode this one, because I need to have a thing like this on it as well. It's going to be a really complicated object. Alright, so I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to extend this thing out another to 0.25. And I'm going to wonder why. It's what do you call it? It's an X-ray mode. There we go. 0.5, enter. Now I'm going to delete that. And I have this kind of solid object. I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to scale it through itself. -1, enter. To make that object right there. I'm going to make this thing a group, and I'm going to find the center of that, put this on the center of this, and then I'm going to move this up, hammer. Nope, that's not what I want. I'm going to get rid of the extra. And I'm going to move this straight up on the blue axis. At that point, I'm now going to edit this thing. And hopefully you can see what I've done there. I've created it'll be obvious once I get this thing done, but you'll see what I did. So at this point, actually, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to edit this group. I'm going to push it down to there. Now I'm going to take this thing, and I'm going to move it at a weird angle. No, it's not. I'm going to take this thing here, and I'm going to move it copied. To the other side, although somehow I lost that measurement. How did I lose those measurements? So I deleted my groups at one point, and in the process, all right, we'll fast forward through a bunch of this stuff later on. Hey, welcome back, guys. I mean, I'll have to edit this thing anyways. There that shouldn't have been there. Oh, I know what's going on. I did that at one point. That was what was going on. Alright, so now get that group. Then alright, so I'm going to drag this thing up, straight up on the blue axis. Try to keep on, maintain on that blue line. There it is. Until I achieve what I'm looking for, which happens to be on blue axis. Trying to get to the point where it's fully covered, where they have the whole full circle there. And then edit group. I'm trying to push on the curved circle. There we go. Alright, so here is that shape. It goes all the way to the top, goes down here, and it's going to cut out an area right there. Now I'm going to make this thing a group, which is already a group, and I'm going to move a copy of it, which should be actually right there, to right here. And then I'm going to move a copy, which I'm going to end up having to adjust from there to there. This one is going to need to be edit group.
Megan called like 10 minutes ago.
What was that?
Megan called you like 10 minutes ago.
Don't worry about it. I'll give her a call later. Okay, and then this one gets moved from there to there. All right, so now I'm going to explode these things Actually, I'm not. I'm going to, because I'm worried that something may not work out right here, I'm going to copy and paste that, move it over here. I'm going to delete all my guides, and I'm going to try this out on this one. So now I'm going to explode everything. Take a moment to delete that line right there. And I'm going to select everything here. But I don't want to select that bottom plate, so I'm going to select all of this stuff. Nope. Going in this direction, everything that there we go. And I'm going to, nope, that does not appear to have been correct. I need the camera, standard views, front, and grab everything. Nope, nope, yeah, actually. It should be good. I think I got it all. Then Intersect Faces with model again. Now hopefully I can delete that, delete that, delete that, delete that. See what I did? I'm pretty darn happy. Because I was only 90% sure that was going to work, and it seems to have worked just well. Sometimes, SketchUp is not the most awesome program, and I need to double click and then single click. Sometimes SketchUp is not the most awesome program in the world, and sometimes it doesn't really work exactly the way you want. So we need, now what we need to do is we need to delete this line here. That thing right there, I think. This thing right there. That thing right there. This thing right there. Let's get this thing out of the way for a second, and I think we might pretty much be there. So this thing is going to fit. Presuming I haven't screwed anything up, this thing is still 5 inches wide. It's still 6 inches this way. The distance between the center of this thing and this is 2.75. And that's the same over here is what it's going to be, 2.75. So the bolts of this are going to fit onto his metal plate that we have here. Then we have these holes right here, which you can put a bolt going up through, up into here. And then he'll be able to put a bolt on top of that to lock this thing down on there. And we're going to print that thing and see whether or not it works. Alright, so as you can see, it looks like a fairly successful 3D print. But I noticed that this spool is empty, which means that I am quite confident that at some point the filament ran out. Now, I should have weighed the filament because the program that I was printing with told me how much filament I needed, and if I had weighed the filament, I would have known how much filament was on there. But by the way, at the moment, it's going to be really easy to find out how much an empty spool weighs, because I happen to have an empty spool right now, so I'm going to weigh that spool for future reference. Now, this thing is mostly printed, but when I checked the height of this thing, it's 2 1/4, and that's not going to be enough for Mr. Hare or Mr. Rodenkirk. So I could reprint the whole thing, but I don't think I have a spool big enough, and I think that the answer will be instead for me to laser cut a piece on here so that I can basically make this thing taller. So I'm going to look into that next. For right now, I need to figure out a way to get this thing off because it's really not easy to get off, but I will get it off anyways. Okay, so good news is I noticed that these 4 holes here were the things that I thought were missing that didn't get printed, but it turns out they did. Which means that this was basically just going to keep printing up until it got to a certain height. So the only problem with this thing is that it's not tall enough. And that's going to be easily resolved with the laser cutter. I'm going to take some 1/4 inch acrylic, and I'm going to cut acrylic pieces that are exactly shaped like this with the holes in the right spot, and then we're going to be able to stack those up to get as high as he wants to. So that's how we're going to resolve this issue. I won't need to reprint this whole thing. I also want to point out that if I had measured correctly if I had weighed my filament, I could have easily reduced the amount of volume on the inside of this thing until I had enough filament to create this thing. The only reason it ran out is because I tried to make this especially strong by making it really pretty solid. And by making it too solid, I ran out of filament. So that's kind of I poorly planned. But in the end, I have enough of this thing printed, I think, that it's going to be able to be used. All right, so as we discussed, this thing didn't fully print, which means it's shorter than it's supposed to be. This thing is supposed to be 2 3/4, and instead it is 2.26. 2.26 is where it's at right now. It's actually kind of neat because I could recreate this whole thing. In fact, I probably will. I'm going to recreate this whole thing. I'm going to start by doing this, and I'm going to copy and paste it over here. Now I'm going to go like this. That's funny. I'm going to recreate exactly what's on there. 2.62 is what that was. Control Z, Control Y. From here to here, 2.62. Number lockers on, 2.62. Try this one more time. 2.62. Enter. There we go. So that's how much didn't print, which is actually not, that can't be right. It was not that high. It was not that tall. It was 2.262. 2.262 is where it was. There we go. That's what didn't print, is everything above that. I'm going to remove all that by doing this. Because I have a way of solving this thing. I don't want to reprint the whole thing. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to edit group. This. I'm going to explode this. Very similar to what I did before. I'm going to grab everything here. I'm going to right click, intersect faces with model. And now I'm going to delete all that. Oop. I need to explode this. I need to grab everything again and intersect faces with model. And then I need to delete all of this. There we go. Come on. The whole thing drives me nuts. Uh-oh, something happened there. Somehow I got too much. Let's just grab the top first. Let's go down to right there. Hopefully that'll work a little better. Now I still took off that side. I think that what I did was I did something wrong. I think I need to, I Control Z my way back, and I'm going to explode this one as well. Explode that one and explode this one. Now everything's exploded. Now I'm going to grab everything, intersect faces model, and hopefully it'll work better this time. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to camera parallel projection. I'm going to camera standard views, and I'm going to do front or back is fine, because that's going to make it. That's going to get rid of all perspective. You can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Still having problems though. Still didn't delete some of these little doohickeys in weird places. Let's go to that. I'm going to reverse this face to make it white just so it looks nicer on the screen. And there we go. So here's what I have right now, which I did some measuring, by the way. I'm guessing this is approximately 5 5/8, if everything's correct. 5 and approximately 7/16, so that's a little less than 5 5/8. Oh, this is fantastic. I was going to do some math. I was going to say, the thing was 5 inches and this is 5 and whatever, and I was going to do some clever tricks, but I don't need to anymore because this surface is now the exact shape of this surface. So I'm going to copy and paste that over here. I'm going to delete that area right there. I'm going to go camera, standard views, top, so I'm looking straight down at it. I'm going to laser cut this to this exact size. And with the laser cutter, I need to know some of these dimensions. This is 6 1/4. Ooh, I need to know, crap. I need to know the exact dimensions, and I'm not giving him. It's close enough though. I'm gonna do 6 1/4. So I'm gonna go File, Export a 2D graphic, and I'm gonna export it to the desktop, and it's gonna be titled, first of all, it's not a JPEG. I want a PDF, and I'm gonna title this Jake Fix, because that's first name of somebody that you should never know because you don't call him that, you call him Mr. Rodenkirk. And now I'm going to minimize that, and Jake Fix is right there. I've already put a piece of acrylic in the in my laser cutter. Don't pan over that way because there's a student over there and we're keeping the students out of this video. I'm going to go to here, I'm going to go to my Glowforge, I'm going to refresh this. This is going to bring up a, this is a cloud thing that is attached to the laser cutter over there. I have it turned on. I have a piece of acrylic in it. I'm going to do a new blank design. That's actually a picture of the piece of acrylic that is in my laser cutter right now. I'm going to back that out a little bit. I'm going to import, upload from the desktop my Jake Fix. I'm going to zoom out. Is it still, where is it? There it is. Oops. Okay, there it is. And I want to move, let's do one more. All right, so I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to move it over here. And I'm wondering how many of these I can get in there. Hopefully, I'm going to.
Okay, so what we did is Mr. Olson and I planned out what we're making here. This little riser here allows me to put a box on top of this plate with these bins still opening. So these bins, come out, sticky. These bins need to open and have clearance. Before this riser was on here, they would hit on the box. But now that we have this little 3-inch riser, it gives it clearance. So we printed this piece here and we added a few little acrylic plates here to raise it up a little bit more. The bolts go all the way through. I just need to get a little spacer for these bolts so that I can tighten them really tight. But it's still totally attached. It doesn't come off. It doesn't go move side to side. And what it is for is so that a box on this electric bike, I can keep my my helmet and my jacket on the box. This box goes on top of here. And before, it wouldn't close. And now it will. Always so many keys. There we go.
I'm not locked it in place.
Yeah, that locks it in place. So now it's locked in place.
And this thing comes down.
Now, yeah, that locks
This thing
and
will
then
close
it'll
once the
yeah.
stuff is in there. So
And
that
then
kind of holds it in place.
These doors now have just the perfect clearance where they don't touch and they clear. Just perfect. So just
Beautiful.
right, just like we measured.
Perfect.
They open right up. So the last thing I need to do is just make these little spacers here, and then this thing is perfectly complete. But this 3D printed piece attaches to the frame of the seat with 4 bolts that we drove all the way through, and then it also attaches to this plate, and that plate attaches to this. So I can use both boxes at the same time.
So some of the final kind of problem solving we had to do is when we 3D printed this, or when I 3D printed it, I didn't weigh out the materials, and I actually ran out of filament in the middle of a print. So these 3 pieces right here, this is the height that it was supposed to be. So I ended up using my laser cutter to cut out these 3 pieces of acrylic to basically make up for the distance of what didn't print. A mistake that I made was right here I did a 1/2 inch in diameter hole for this nut, assuming that a 1/2 inch was going to be enough, but clearly it's not. But we're going to solve this problem by going and getting a 1/2 inch diameter tube, metal tube, and cut a little short length of it, stick it up there, so that this bolt will end up down here, or the nut will end up down here, and there'll be like a brass or an aluminum tube sticking in there, so it'll be able to cinch up better than that. But all in all, pretty darn happy. This is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, and it looks like it's going to last for years to come.
It will. Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
All right, you're welcome.